Teşekkür ederim. Herkese günaydınlar diliyorum. Tekrar bu dönem webinarlarımıza hoş geldiniz. ASBİGO'nun yürüttüğü webinarlarımıza hoş geldiniz. Ya öncelikle ben dünkü elim kazada hayatını kaybeden askerlerimize, komutanımıza başsağlığı Allah'tan rahmet dileyerek ve ailelerine başsağlığı dileyerek başlamak istiyorum. Hepimiz gerçekten çok üzüldük. İsterseniz yabancı öğrencilerimiz de olduğu için dilimizi değiştirelim ve İngilizceye geçelim. So I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. It's this semester we're going to devote all our webinar series actually to diaspora and diaspora studies, and we are going to discuss different aspects of diaspora during these webinars, whether it is diaspora politics or diasporas as conflict prevention mechanisms, or radicalism in the diaspora, or Crimean diaspora, for example, or long-distance nationalism, and also the Cherkess or Circassian diaspora in Turkey. So you can see the details of our topics and the subjects actually covered, including our speakers' bios, in our website. Thank you very much. So today's webinar is Diaspora and Diaspora Politics. So of course, Onur Hoca needs no introduction, and he's here, a member of our faculty at the International Relations of Social Sciences University of Ankara. And so I will not take much of your time. I would like to welcome everyone. Please follow us on our webinars. It's going to be every other Friday. And we are making announcements through Twitter and through our website. And I'll give the floor to Aysima now to make the introduction, a kind introduction for Onur Hoca. Thank you.
Thank you, Hocam. Welcome all. This is our first webinar of the spring semester. Today we're going to host Dr. Onur Unutulmaz. He works as assistant professor in international relations at the Social Sciences University of Ankara. Dr. Unutulmaz has received his master's degree in migration studies and doctorate in anthropology, both from the University of Oxford in 2009 and 2014 respectively. He holds another master's degree, which was obtained in 2007 in international relations from Koç University. His undergraduate degrees are in political science and international relations and sociology, both from Boğaziçi University. His areas of expertise include international migration, integration of immigrants, migrant education policies, diasporas, and national diaspora policies. Today, his title of speech is Diasporas and Diaspora Politics, and I think we all are very eager to listen to him, so I would like to give the floor to Professor Unutulmaz. Hocam.
Thank you very much, Aysima, for your kind introduction, and also thank you, Şebnem Hocam, for this invitation. Let me also first start by taking a moment to express my deepest condolences for our soldiers who had fallen. It is really difficult in these kind of days to continue your life as usual, but it is what we need to do. Now I'll share my screen so you can see my presentation here. As this semester's webinar series focus on the diasporas, this first webinar will be on diasporas and diaspora politics, kind of a framework setting type of webinar. I'll try to define certain concepts, obviously including the concept of diaspora itself, and also some others like diaspora policies, diaspora politics, what is the difference, diaspora institutions in different countries, etc. So let's begin, and we need to begin from the meaning of the word, the meaning of this now very popular concept of diaspora. For the past couple of decades, diaspora has increased in popularity, not only in social sciences and academia, but also in public, among public as well. So both the administrators, governments, and also general public now use this concept more than any time in the past. But what does it mean? Do we actually mean the same thing when we say diaspora everywhere all the time, or are we talking about different things? Now we need to start, as with a lot of different concepts in social sciences, with saying that diaspora has no agreed upon meaning, perfectly agreed, unanimously agreed meaning. We do know what kind of a community that we're talking about when we say diaspora, but you will see that different people say that community cannot be considered as a diaspora because, or this community needs to be seen as a diaspora because, and there's always constant debate and discussion on this. Now, something that is undisputable is that it has to do with the notion of scattering or dispersal. All right. So it comes, the word itself comes from ancient Greek. Etymologically speaking, it is the combination of two words, dia and sperein, and it's, as you can see, it includes this connotation of scattering and dispersal. In its original context, in its ancient Greek context where the word derives from, it referred to a group that had to leave their homeland and scatter after a disaster or a devastation. So originally, diaspora referred to those who were dispersed geographically after being forced to move. Okay, so when we look at how the word was used in social sciences, we see that traditionally, you know, starting from 20th century, mid-20th century studies in social sciences, when we see diaspora being used, it usually referred to a specific community. And which community was that? When we say diaspora or diaspora, which community we meant? It was the Jewish diaspora, the Jews. All right. So this is because in their original historical narrative, the narrative of the Jewish dispersal from an original homeland fits very neatly with the you know, original traditional usage of the concept of diaspora. They were forced to leave, they yearned to go back, and they never ceased their relationship with that homeland, etc. So, you know, all is there, and this has gone for a long time, so that when we see the word diaspora, we usually saw it with a capital D, and that capital D diaspora word usually meant the Jewish diaspora. And the effects have stayed with us for so long, and to a certain extent they are still with us. Today, when we look at the dictionary for the definition of the word diaspora in Oxford English Dictionary, for example, the first meaning is the dispersion of the Jews beyond Israel, Jews living outside Israel. So the first meaning still in the English language dictionary has to do with the historical experience and historical narrative of the Jewish diaspora. Then, however, immediately we see that there has been an expansion of the meaning of the word in more recent decades. And in the second definition in the English dictionary, diaspora, so we said that in English dictionary, it still is defined in relation with and in association with the Jewish experience. One might think that that might be political, and since it is the English dictionary and there is the involvement of these countries in the history of Israel, etc., this might be politically induced. In Turkish dictionary as well, we do see the association with the Jewish experience. However, it is not in the first definition as the case in Oxford English Dictionary. We define diaspora in the Turkish dictionary, herhangi bir ulusun veya inanç mensuplarının ana yurtları dışında azınlık olarak yaşadıkları yer. Therefore, something of a combination of the second and third definition that we see in the English dictionary. But in the third definition, the Turkish language dictionary itself includes the diaspora is still associated with the Jewish experience. Now, we have seen implications of this several times. For instance, a couple years back, we were conducting a research, a kind of an international research on global Muslim diaspora. Okay, and we went to several countries where there are significant sizable Muslim minorities, but the majority of the populations were non-Muslim. And we asked them whether they considered themselves to be a part of a global Muslim diaspora. And you know, it's a very kind of complex, complicated project with a lot of findings. But one thing that was interesting in this context was we have heard a lot of Muslims complaining, saying that you cannot call a Muslim community a diaspora. That's a Jewish word. It is associated with the Jewish experience. So you can call us Ummah, you can call us something else, but you cannot call us diaspora. So, you know, not a majority of the respondents, but a sizable number said this. However, as you are all here, I'm sure you're aware that the concept of diaspora has expanded its meaning and its use for the past several, you know, for the past 2-3 decades at least. We have seen an increase in the number of academic journals dealing with the issue, number of articles, number of academic studies, and not only anymore on Jewish community or the Jewish experience. Now we see that a lot of different communities are being called, and they also identify as diasporas. We hear, for instance, you know, also among the kind of more established diasporas, Armenian diaspora, Palestinian diaspora, African diaspora, Chinese diaspora. We in Turkey are increasingly talking about the Turkish diaspora, particularly concentrated in Europe, but elsewhere as well. And, you know, there is this concept of a Muslim diaspora. Can we talk about a Muslim diaspora referring to people coming from Iraq and Indonesia and Turkey and Saudi Arabia and calling them a Muslim diaspora? That was the topic, and if there are questions, we can talk about it. This has also a question mark for the moment, the Syrian diaspora, because as we shall see, the Syrian diaspora or the Syrian forced migrant communities have everything it takes to become a diaspora, to mobilize as a diaspora, but it is still what Sheffer called an incipient, maybe even an emerging diaspora. So we will need some time to call or to evaluate the effectiveness of a Syrian diaspora. Now, this process of, you know, being defined with only forced migration and then being defined with only in relation to the experiences of a specific group was also seen in the diaspora studies academic field. There we see 4 different phases. The first phase was this prototypical diaspora phase, when the studies on diaspora, whether they are about memory, whether they are about the relationship between space and place, whether they're about social mobilization, integration, assimilation, all of them were conducted when they are conducted on diasporas. They were conducted either on the Jewish community, Jewish diaspora, or those whose narrative, whose national narrative, historical narrative had significant parallels with the Jewish experience, such as the Armenians, also talking about a forced expulsion, a homeland that they yearn for, etc. So the prototypical diaspora studies phase were mostly on these forced migration created communities. Then, however, came this second phase, starting from 1960s, 1970s onwards and getting intensified along the way. Every migrant origin community started to be called a diaspora. At least the potential has been entertained and measured, whether can we call this group a diaspora. That has something to do with the analytical potential of the concept. You know, it says more than minority. It says more than immigrant community. Diaspora also implies that these people have somewhere else that they call home, and they remain intricately, or maybe not so intricately, linked, related to with that home, etc. So a lot of different communities started to be called diaspora, and the definition the definition of diaspora has been expanded. By the way, I just got a warning saying that in 10 minutes the meeting will come to an end. I don't know if you saw that as well. And now I have a window here, remaining meeting time 9 minutes 38. So shall I just be very quick?
No. Actually, we'll sort this problem out. Don't worry. I don't know why it happened.
Right. Okay, let me just then tell you. The third phase of diaspora studies was a critique of this expansion, okay? Particularly the social constructionist critiques came, and they said, you cannot simply call any group a diaspora. That doesn't make sense. If every community is a diaspora, then no community is a diaspora. If a concept explains everything, it in fact explains nothing, right? So diaspora needs to have a coherent analytical core that, you know, that defines and that refers to specific communities and not to the others. So in this third phase, a lot of critique have been leveled against just willy-nilly using the concept of diaspora to refer to any community. And then came the current phase of consolidation. We in social sciences working on diaspora appear to agree that no, we cannot call any and all groups a diaspora. There need to be some criteria for that. That criteria should not be very restrictive, so that only a couple of communities and their historical experience are considered to be worthy of being called diaspora. So in this consolidation phase, what we see actually is some of the major names in this area started working on how to define a diaspora, what characteristics need to be there in a community so that they can be called a diaspora, so on and so forth. Excuse me. So, all right. This debate is, you know, seemingly never ending, okay? Who can we call a diaspora? Who cannot we call a diaspora? What characteristics should there be or not? But it appears that in recent context, what is important is mobilization of the group as an actor. If diaspora can be mobilized and can exert some influence, whether on the society in which they live, or the government in the host country, or the government in home country, or other actors, then we're talking about this notion of a diaspora policy, diaspora politics, and diaspora making a difference. Otherwise, it is, do you consider yourself to be diaspora? Do you act like a diaspora? I don't find that discussion to be very fruitful and beneficial anyway. The more beneficial thing is the mobilization of diasporas, diasporic communities coming together so that they can act in unison, they can act under some leadership, and they can make a difference. They can make an argument heard, right? So how are diasporas mobilized? Robin Cohen, in his book Global Diasporas, an Introduction, offers an analogy that I really like. And the analogy of a mobilized diaspora is a clay pot, okay, a clay pot. And what do you need for that clay pot? Kilden yapılmış bir çömlek, the clay pot. What do you need? You need three things, he says, for the mobilization of diasporas. In the same way, you need three things. One, the clay, basic, right? The raw material, ham madde. If you don't have the clay, if you don't have the raw material, how can you make the clay pot? And this, the raw material, the clay, refers to the history and experiences of the group. Just imagine how easy it would be to mobilize for the Syrians now, okay, having experienced a bloody civil war with all those notions and memories very much intact, having had to leave their countries behind, having lost several loved ones, etc., etc. Now, this is the history and experiences. The language is very much alive. The identity is very much alive. There is a lot of room for political mobilization as well. And think of another community which can be seen as a diaspora community. For instance, the Germans, the German, senior citizens who, after retirement, moved to, southern France and Malta and Turkey, buying houses in Alanya and whatnot, Marmaris, etc. Which one is easier to mobilize? Obviously, these Syrians, forced migrants, they're much easier to mobilize. It doesn't mean that they will necessarily, because of this experience and history, be able to make more influence, but they will be easier to mobilize. The history and experiences of the group is important. That's the raw material. Then you need to take this clay, the raw material, into a mold, kalıp, to give it shape, right? And this refers to the opportunity structures and the context, the legal context, the political context, the cultural, social context in the host country. Again, let me try to give you an example. Would it be easier for the Turkish diaspora to mobilize in the UK or Germany, where there is the rule of law? I don't claim that there is no problems there, there is no discrimination there, but at least they have a strong system with rights and entitlements. There are NGOs, there are independent courts, etc. You can open up your own mosque. You can take your child to learn your own language. In fact, in Germany, free of charge, they are going to provide in public schools education in Turkish for Turkish origin students. And also think about whether it would be so easy for a Turkish migrant community in China or North Korea or Iran. Okay, so opportunity structures where the diaspora is living is very important. What kind of a legal structure, political structure, institutional structure they have. And there, of course, the social matters also are important. It says less than a minute. I'm seriously concerned I will be cut off now. But
no, hocam, it's we took care of it. Gamze Hanım took care of it. Don't
okay.
worry.
All right.
Well, hopefully.
Thank you. So the opportunity structures where the diaspora is also important in mobilizing, therefore, producing influence for a diaspora. And the third one is at least as important as the former two. It is the potter. Someone to take that clay, put into the mold and give it shape. The potters, çömlekçi in Turkish, are the leaders. Obviously, diasporas need leaders. These need to be political, social, cultural leaders, and they need to have two important characteristics. One, they need to be able to represent the diasporas. They need to be seen as one of them. They need to be seen by the state and the other actors dealing with them, legitimately speaking on behalf of those people. Ability to represent. And two, also important, and that is basically what a leader is, they need to lead. They need to be able to shape the opinions, convince the groups so that they can produce specific actions. So if you have the history, if you have the identity, if you have the raw material as a group, if the context in which you're living allows it. So, one can say there are also additional requirements or additional things that are necessary for a diaspora to be effectively mobilized and exert influence. But these three are definitely things that need to be there, right? So this is a mobilized diaspora. And as you can see, we need the mold, we need the clay, and we need potters to shape it. Now, when we say we don't, how do we identify a diaspora? In social sciences, we usually have 4 tools. When one is the difference between ethic and emic definition. Ethic definition is the kind of objective definition of an observer looking at a group and saying whether, evaluating whether or not that group is a diaspora. Emic, however, emic definition is the group's own definition. In anthropology, we hear about this emic versus ethic definitions a lot as the main purpose of anthropology, and the anthropologist through ethnographic fieldwork is to see the world through the eyes of its subject, to see the emic definition, emic understanding of the world. So what does this mean? One tool is to see whether the group, the community, considers itself as a distinct ethnic group that has links to faraway homelands elsewhere, etc. So whether they consider themselves to be a diaspora, but that is very important in terms of mobilization as well. But that in itself is not enough, because specific groups come together and they mobilize and organize, particularly when there are external reasons, there's a crisis, something, and then they might just dissolve. So we need to see whether this group acts as a diaspora and remains a diaspora through time. So the second tool for the social scientist to decide whether a specific group, a community, is a diaspora or not, to see their actions and their position through time. How does it change? Wait and see. Third is, as I said, a lot of important names in this literature came up with their lists of common features of diasporas. Scheffer had one, Cohen had one, Safran had one, and some of them are a list of 7 items, 12 items. Some are more exhaustive, others are more general. But we need to say that there need to be specific characteristics of a group so that we can call them a diaspora. And this comes from, again, Cohen's book, which is a combination of several other lists. And it says dispersal from an original homeland to 2 or more regions, not 1, 2 or more, because, diaspora, the connotation of dispersal, 2 or more is expected, a scattering, a dispersal. As you can see, it says dispersal from an original homeland, often traumatically, referring to the tragedies and forced migration. But then it says alternatively or additionally, it can be, not forced, voluntary migration as well. It can be expansion from a homeland in search of work, trades, to further colonial ambitions, to work in former colonial places. This is very important, a collective memory and myth about the homeland. if you don't have this, obviously that group cannot be called a diaspora. If you don't have a notion of a homeland elsewhere, then you're not a diaspora. Whether or not you feel associated with something, some groups, some countries, that need to be the idea of a homeland. And it's usually an idealization of this ancestral home. We do see it in many different migrant contexts. Migrants usually look at homeland in a nostalgic light, and what we see in diasporas is you know, generations after generations, this idealization of the nostalgic homeland usually lives on. For instance, in my doctoral research in London, when I talked to Turkish Cypriots, there was this guy that I always remember, and he talked about Cyprus. He never set foot on Cyprus, but he talked about Cyprus in this wonderful way. It was so peaceful and harmonious, and everybody liked one another. Neighbors were so good friends. And he said, and that part is very funny to me. My uncle, who was, you know, someone who forgets all the time, would leave the keys to the car in the in the car, so that he wouldn't miss them, he wouldn't dislocate them. All right, so it was so safe. There was no crime at all, that they were just leaving car keys within the car, not being afraid that it would get stolen. That is an idealization of a nostalgic ancestral home that they never been. And we do hear about it from diasporas a lot, of that good old days when they had to leave or they left. This is something that you know, is included in some of the lists, but I don't think it is so crucial to define a diaspora. The frequent development of a return movement, it doesn't culminate into a significant return movement in most diasporas, but that notion that one day I will go back, one day I will go to my village, at least sometimes my grave will be, you know, where my grandfather's grave is, kind of return notion is usually there. This is very important, a strong ethnic group consciousness. You know, if you don't consider your group to be a separate ethnic group from others, then you are assimilated basically into the mainstream. You need to consider your group, your community, as a separate ethnic group, so that identity through, you know, common history, culture, religion, language, belief in a common faith, it can be culminated in, needs to be there, that identity. This again, I don't think it is a vital characteristic, but it is sometimes on the list. A troubled relationship with host societies, usually. But as I said, I don't think that a lack of acceptance by the host society is a necessary feature for a diaspora. But very often, very frequently, we do see that. A sense of empathy, co-responsibility. Obviously, if this exists, if you do believe that you are a different ethnic community, then that needs to be followed by a sense of empathy, responsibility for your co-ethnics. You know, one of the things that kind of has turned into a stereotype about the Jewish community, the Jewish diaspora, is how they support one another, right? In many countries, you can hear about it, and they say, you know, even if they need something from the grocery store, there is a grocery store right down their street, but they don't go there. They go all the way to the other end of the town, if necessary, to the grocery store of another Jewish person, so that they can support one another. That kind of, you know, this is obviously a stereotype, but that kind of support, even if it's not to that degree, is necessary, so that this group kind of supports each other and keeps the identity alive. Another characteristic is a possibility of a distinctive creative, enriching life in host countries if they tolerate pluralism. And then we do see that in literature, for example, diaspora members are disproportionately represented, overrepresented in art, in literature, because they usually are more creative. They kind of get more than one type of life they see, and they usually have a better, more complicated filters as well. So that was number 2 today. Anyhow, so we said that the last tool that social scientists can use to identify a diaspora, to compare them with ideal types of diasporas. And here we do have specific types, main types of diaspora identified in social sciences, and you can see whether the group that you're trying to decide whether it's a diaspora or not resembles the experiences, resembles the history of these groups, etc. So the first main type of diaspora, also called the prototypical diaspora, is the victim diasporas. Diasporas who have been subjected, or whose ancestors have been subjected to forced dislocation, and then they were dispersed. Main examples include obviously the Jews, Palestinians, and Armenians. Others might include the Irish, not necessarily forced by a political government or an army, but famine and several other historical circumstances. Africans have the whole history of forced movements through slave trade, right? The infamous slave trade where ships from Europe take slaves, and millions upon millions of Africans have been transferred from 16th century up until the mid 19th century. Okay, early 19th century, the slave trade was banned, but slavery continued for some more time. The second main type is labor diasporas and indentured Indians, who incidentally replaced the slaves in starting from the second half of the 19th century from the subcontinent of India. They were brought to the colonies at the time to replace that cheap labor force that was slaves with indentured, contracted, so-called contracted Indian laborers. A very good example that a lot of you are familiar with is the Turks. We started sending migrant workers from 1960s onwards in mass, right? In 1961 was the Turkish first bilateral agreement with Germany. In October, it will be the 60th year of that, and now there are several events to celebrate or commemorate that date. Turks went there to be temporary labor, but then they stayed, and now we have millions of Turks everywhere in Europe. So that can be seen as a labor diaspora. There are imperial diasporas. In some cases, individuals do not cross borders, borders cross individuals. When there was a British Empire, that was the, this huge empire on which the sun never sets. When it broke down, a lot of people from Britain remained in several places, including South Africa, including Asia, a lot of places. And sometimes they're called expats. Sometimes they are also called a British diaspora, an imperial diaspora. After the Soviet Union experience, there were also a lot of ethnic Russians in countries like Belarus, Moldova, Ukraine. We do see that ethnic Russians who usually are pro-Russian politically, ideologically, creating a lot of complications for those countries. There are also trade diasporas, Lebanese and Chinese, similar to labor diasporas. These people started going on these main trade routes, and after a certain while, they started living in several places. The one type of diaspora, it is more contested, is deterritorialized, because the whole notion of a diaspora is seemingly predicated upon the fact that you live in one country, but you see elsewhere as your home, as your homeland, as your watan, right? When you take that out of the equation, when you say that it can even be deterritorialized, for instance, the Sindhis, Parsis, Roma, Romanlar diyoruz biz Türkçe'de. Roma people, they are originated in Balkans, in Mediterranean. We don't necessarily know where their hometown or homeland is, but they do have an ethnic, distinct ethnic identity. They do have a cultural identity, etc. So can we call them a diaspora or not? A different kind of question comes in relation with Muslims. I referred to it a little bit. If you remember, Muslims don't have a homeland as Muslims. They have their homeland as whatever their national identity is. Turkey, Pakistan, Iraq, Indonesia. So do we consider these people, when they move and live in America and Canada, do we consider them to be parts of the Turkish, Iraqi, Indonesian diasporas, or can we talk about a Muslim diaspora that encompasses them all? That was the question. And kind of a teaser, if you want to ask about it, we can talk in more detail. It seems that we cannot talk about the global Muslim diaspora as yet. It can develop further, in further generations, but so far, no. Now, I'd like to differentiate between diaspora policies and diaspora politics, okay? When we talk about diaspora policies in Turkish, Diaspora Politikaları, we usually talk about the policies of a state, the origin state, in relation with their diasporas, their citizens, or co-ethnics, etc. They try to engage these diasporas. They try to engage their diaspora in relation to the economic, political, diplomatic interests of the country. Yeah. When you look at a lot of countries' diaspora policies, at the heart is we don't want our diasporas to be assimilated wherever they are. We don't want them to forget who they are, where they are from, where their fathers and grandfathers are from, ancestors are from. We don't want them to lose their language, etc., so that that relationship with their homeland remains strong. Why? Because out of that, they want to accrue some benefits like economic development, if possible, to benefit from the diaspora as an instrument of soft power, not hard power of the military and the economic sanctions, but the soft power of convincing others, telling them your side of the story, letting them know that you are whatever. That's kind of soft power, and diasporas can potentially be very strong instruments for that. Also, in recent years, in addition to complementing the kind of traditional diplomacy channels between states and states, public diplomacy as a notion started. It can be seen as part of the whole soft power discussion, or a specific manifestation of it, public diplomacy, in which you try to influence the public of other countries, the elites of other countries, show them your argument, etc., etc., diaspora can also be a very important actor there. So when we say diaspora policies, we usually refer to the origin states policies, including these. Some others might be added, obviously, so that the diasporas might be more in service of the good of the states. Yeah. Diaspora politics, however, is a much wider area. Diaspora siyaseti. Diaspora politikaları değil, diaspora siyaseti. In Turkish, it gets a bit more confusing, I think, but in English, diaspora politics is clearly different than diaspora policies. It's much wider. It definitely includes the diaspora policies that we talk about, but it also includes, for instance, the host states' policies towards these diasporic communities. Now, when we're talking about diaspora policies of Turkey, we're talking about, for instance, Turkey's policies towards its citizens or co-ethnics living in Germany. But Germany's policies towards the Turkish minority or Turkish origin citizens living in Germany is also included here, because Germany is very well aware that this is a specific ethnic community, has a very strong association and relationship with another country, with another state. They speak the language, they are Muslim, etc. There's a distinct cultural identity there as well. So their policies addressing the Turkish minority in Germany needs to be seen within this wider area of diaspora politics. Obviously, they're not going to call it a diaspora policy. They're going to call it integration policies, multicultural policies, whatever, right? But it is not only the states, it's not only the sending state and the receiving state. There are so many other actors in today's world, including diasporas themselves. Yeah, we talked about this clay pot, kilden çömlek, and that clay pot is a very able actor, usually as through civil society organizations, through economic actors. They can also engage in several transnational activities themselves, and they have been doing that through media, through a lot of different outlets. And apart from the sending, receiving state, diasporas themselves, there are also activities of so many other actors, including non-state actors. It can be international organizations, it can be local NGOs, it can be corporations. They are all within this wider political area of diaspora politics. So we shouldn't equate diaspora politics with diaspora policies. We need to identify and distinguish between the two. Having said this, the past couple of decades have seen a tremendous growth in the number of diaspora institutions of many different countries. In some of these countries, the diaspora institution is as high level as a ministry. Like in Armenia, it's the Ministry of Diaspora. Here you can say in Georgia, there's a state ministry for diaspora issues. In Haiti, Ministry of Haitians living abroad. India, Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs. It doesn't say diaspora, but it says those who live overseas, those who live abroad. Okay, Yurt dışı Türkler Başkanlığı is a similar kind of naming. In Iraq, again, it doesn't say diaspora, but it says Ministry of Migration and the Displaced, because Iraq has witnessed a lot of wars in the last several decades, unfortunately. In Israel, one of the, you can even argue that a state that was established by the efforts of diaspora, that is the Ministry of Information and Diaspora with the name, and so on and so forth. In other countries, it is not as high level as ministry, but kind of more sub-level. In Albania, for example, under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there's a diaspora department. In Egypt, there is the Ministry of Manpower and Immigration, and under that there is immigration sector. When we look at Turkey, when we look at Turkey's diaspora institution, it is the YTB, Presidency of Turks Abroad and Related Communities. So as you can see, it is not only Turks abroad. The remit of this institution is a bit wider, including the related communities in, historically, culturally, politically related communities are also considered under the activities and authority of this institution. And this is the important part. As I briefly mentioned a moment ago, Turkey's diaspora policies are based on 3 objectives. This comes from YTP's official website. It says, 1, maintaining ties of Turkish citizens living abroad with their homelands. Yeah, so the relationship only exists if these ties exist, if these ties are important, significant. So they say we need to maintain and strengthen. 2, necessary for this first objective, preserving the native language, culture, and identity of our citizens living abroad. Preserving the language. What does this mean? Fighting against assimilation. They shouldn't forget who they are. They shouldn't forget where they come from. And lastly, strengthening the social status of Turkish citizens living abroad, to fight for them, to protect them, to support them so that they can come to better places in their host societies, in their societies that they are living in. Now, it's all very good and it all looks great. The problem is the first 2 is seemingly in contradiction with the 3. So from the perspective of the host countries, when you look from the perspective of Germany, for example, Germany says, hey, Turkey, if you keep trying to maintain the ties, strengthen these ties, preserve the language, preserve the culture, preserve the identity, and put a lot of emphasis on that, and a very nationalistic emphasis of that as well, how can you expect these people to integrate and endorse the values of the German society, the culture of the German society? So they say your insistence that these people don't forget who they are is a disguised attempt at preventing them from integrating into German society. Yeah. So that is a very important argument. I do see that there is something to it, and when this is said, a lot of people in Turkey, they tend to automatically believe that that is very racist of the German state. How come they take any issue with Turkey wanting its citizens or the second, third generations, generation Turkish individuals in Germany to maintain their ties and their belonging with Turkey? Of course, that is what they need to do. But when we change the very same question to Syrians and the Syrian government official making this explanation, then a lot of people would feel differently. Yeah. Today, we still are not there yet to talk about the integration prospects of Syrians. We will talk about it a lot in the coming days and months and years, I know. But still, when we consider a Syrian minister saying that don't forget Arabic, don't lose your citizenship, don't lose your relation with this country, then a lot of people in Turkey would say, well, you better get off then. If you want to keep it, go back to that country. And it is the exact same thing the Germans are saying about the Turks. If you want to keep your Turkish culture and Turkish language, why don't you go to Turkey? Obviously, it is a layered discussion that we need to engage. There are a lot of racist arguments on the one side, but we need to also try and engage with the concerns of native populations in Turkey as well as in elsewhere. So, there are a lot of books and booklets telling people how to make good, effective diaspora policies. I'm not going to spend time on them. So this is coming from, I think, a World Bank report on how to engage diasporas in economic development, identify goals and capacities, what you want your diaspora to do, how you imagine, how you envisage them to serve. Know your diaspora. That is very important. If you want to develop effective diaspora policies, you need to know your diaspora. You need to know what they can do, what they cannot do, where you're strong in terms of the human profile, in terms of the human capital, in terms of the social capital, in terms of the financial capital, and then you need to plan, advise, design, etc. your diaspora policies. This is something that a lot of countries, a lot of states don't do, but it is very important. Listen to your diaspora. It shouldn't be only about what as a state you want, you define your interests as, and you want your diaspora to be at the service of those interests. You also need to listen to them, how they see future, how they see their relationship with their homeland and the host land that they are living in. You need to build trust, and that is very important, and that is very difficult as well. There are specific communities, specific groups out of blind nationalism. They say that is my state, and whatever they say, it is my command. But it doesn't work like that. The relationship should be built on a mutual trust, and for that the diaspora institutions, individuals need to be given assurances. They need to be shown a transparent, accountable system where their investments, when their involvements are going to be planned. And this is also important. Mobilize the stakeholders. It shouldn't be only about one individual or one institution of diaspora and the state. It needs to be this is a huge potential. We're living in this globalized age of communication and technology, and all stakeholders can be involved to increase that potential. Now, this is my last slide. So I wanted to raise a couple of questions for discussion, and then obviously your questions, whatever questions you may have, we can also discuss about them. One important question in recent years that we see is, are we talking now, when we're talking about this diaspora policies, we seemingly talking about one diaspora, one state, one diaspora, how you're going to engage that diaspora, and how you're going to make that diaspora be more beneficial for the interests of the state, as if there is only one homogeneous group that can be controlled or at least communicated to, and as if the interests of the country, of the state, are seen equally as the same by diaspora and the state. This cannot be further away from the truth. The reality is there are so many different diasporic communities. Some of them are in fact seeing the interests of the country very differently from the state or from the government that is trying to engage them. Right? Just an example, let's talk about the Iranian diaspora. When in 1979, the Iranian Islamic Revolution took place, a lot of people from Iran, from all segments of society, but particularly including those secularists, those royalists, higher socioeconomic groups, etc., they escaped Iran, right? In 1979 onwards, and now they're living in a lot of different places for political reasons as well. Some countries are hosting them, and some countries are listening to them more than they would if they were not anti-Iranian regime at the moment. But at the end of the day, we have Iranian diaspora that is very anti-Iran. Now we're talking about this diaspora policies in such a way that sees that this diaspora is an instrument of state influence. It is a tool at its disposal if you can make good diaspora policies, that is. But that is not the right way to approach the situation. There are so many different diasporic communities and their ideas about the homeland, about how the homeland is being run, how the current government, whether it's good or bad for the homeland, it changes. Therefore, we cannot necessarily talk about a diaspora or the diaspora of a country, but diasporas, diasporic communities, okay? And you need to prepare and you need to implement differential policies in your relation with that. And Turkey is obviously not further away from this problem. We now have this, so-called FETÖ group communities living a lot of different countries, and they are making anti-Turkish propaganda, claiming that they are advancing Turkey's interests. They say the government there is not legitimate, so help us. So that equation, that state diaspora policy need to be revisited. The second point I'd like to raise is the concept of a state diaspora. Recently, some people talked about the possibility of a state forming its own diaspora. If there is this diversity there, and if it's good that you have a mobilized, organized diaspora outside of your country, institutionalized, that is very good for your country, then why not state invest in this financially, politically, in terms of time, and create its own diaspora? The short answer is, then that diaspora would not be as effective. Diasporas can become more effective if they develop organically themselves, and if they are seen to be a separate actor. If they are seen as just the tool of the state in a hierarchic manner, they don't have their own ideas at all, interests, agenda, they're doing what their state tells them to do, then that diaspora will not be effective. So a state can definitely support diasporas and diasporic communities, definitely help them to develop, but it shouldn't try to force these diasporas and diasporic communities to become hierarchically placed mere tools of itself. That's two. And the third point that I'd like to raise, I already talked about it a bit. It seems that it is necessarily the case that diaspora policies of the origin states and the integration policies of the host states have to clash. It brings up an imagery where individual member of the diaspora or the immigrants is in the middle, and from both arms the states are pulling. Are you one of us? Are you one of them? Prove yourself, prove your loyalty, prove that you're Turkish, prove that you're German. And when, for instance, Mesut Özil makes a choice and play for the German national football team, a lot of people in the Turkish side said he's assimilated, he betrayed Turkey, he is not Turkish, see, he play for Germany. When another Turkish origin German player who learned football and played football for 10 years, 20 years in Germany chose to play for Turkish national team, then a lot of Germans say, see, he was not integrated, he betrayed Germany, we teach them everything, we gave everything to him, but he chose Turkey. So in this context, if we keep pushing individuals and if we keep forcing them to prove whether they are one of us all the time, yes, they have to necessarily clash, but that can change, and I think that it will change. It will change, and I'm saying this in the face of increasing populist, nationalist, extreme right political discourses everywhere, including Europe. It will change. It will have to change. We are going to come to a point where we will appreciate the fact that individuals can have, and they do have, multiple identities that don't necessarily contradict one another. One individual can equally feel Turkish and German. There is no natural, universal reason why this shouldn't be the case. If you make it the case, if you're saying I am German, you cannot say I am Turkish, then you're making that. But it's not a natural, it's not an indispensable, it is not an inevitable reason. People can feel that they belong to more than one country. People can be loyal to more than one country. So I don't think that they absolutely, essentially have to clash. But at the moment, they do clash because, as I said, belonging and loyalty and whatnot, all these nationalist concepts are flying around, and they are kind of putting immigrants in a very difficult position. But in the future, I hope that when this changes, the clash will change as well. Having said this, I think I took more time than I was supposed to, but we had some technical difficulties as well. Let me stop here and we can have